Welcome back to the green yard. It is the middle of August and we are having some fantastic monsoons this year. Lots of rain, lots of cooler weather. Today it's only 100 degrees outside, which is fantastic. Plants are absolutely loving it. You can look around me. We're over here in the food forest part of the green yard. Koi fish pond is right behind the camera, and we have our dwarf Namwa banana putting off a whole bunch of new growth. This is our soursop tree right here as well, putting off a whole bunch of new growth, growing fantastic. We have our Michaelia alba right here. Same thing, I count probably 30 new leaves on our Michaelia alba. Loquat's growing up into the sun. It actually wants a little bit more sun, surprisingly. And we're over here in the green yard today because I have in the food forest part of the green yard today because I have a fun new addition to the green yard, and it's going to be this guy right here. So this is called a Santol, S-A-N-T-O-L tree. It is a very tropical tree. The fruit is very similar to a mangosteen. For those of you that know what a mangosteen looks like, it's kind of a roundish fruit, and on the inside it has 5 seeds that almost look like kind of like a mini orange, but they're white. Santol is very similar to that, except the flavor from my research is a little bit more on the sour side of things. But it's probably the closest that I'll ever get to growing a mangosteen here in the green yard. Mangosteens are very difficult to grow outside of their natural climate, but the Santol has done okay here from what I've heard from other people that are growing it, and I'm excited to try something a little bit new. This is probably the best spot for it. The reason being, it requires a lot of protection both in the summer and in the winter. Summer, it needs basically shade all day long. This is underneath this huge towering mulberry tree that I always talk about, kind of our queen tree here, biggest tree in the yard, and provides shade all day long. You'll see there's a little bit of sunlight behind me. I also have my passion fruit vine growing along here, so it's going to minimize that sunlight as time goes on. Also in the winter, it needs a lot of cold protection, just like our soursop tree. So this is actually going to be going right here, tucked kind of right, not right next to the soursop, but far enough away over here. That's where we're going to end up putting our Santol tree, and hopefully it grows and fills in this space here, kind of help filling in the rest of this corner over here in the green yard with our Michaelia alba and our loquat, our Namwa banana, soursop, and papaya. So it should be very well protected in this area from both frost as well as from the Phoenix sun, that desert sun. So let's go ahead, let's get the mulch, because there's about a foot of mulch here right now. Let's get that mulch moved out of the way, get down to that soil, start digging, and see how we're going to plant this beautiful Santol tree with all of this gorgeous new growth on it. So here we go. One of the great things about having mulch here already, and it's been down here for over a year, is that the soil underneath this mulch, besides being full of all sorts of animals, insects, things of that nature, it has also this beautiful, gorgeous, dark color. So we already are setting this Santol up for success by having this organically rich soil here from the get-go. So it's really nice that we've been able to establish just have the mulch down, have it start breaking down, so that way when I do add these trees to the green yard, they end up being even more successful because we already have that organic material here. So let's go ahead, let's start digging the hole. Kind of positioning this far enough away from the soursop that it won't interfere with its growth, as well as from the banana. I am squeezing this in here a little bit, but I also know that that's what it's going to need in order to survive and thrive here in the Phoenix desert. It needs to be in that microclimate where it's really protected. The soursop over here has actually been growing more into the sun as well, which is fine with me because there's an empty space there next to it where it can grow out into the sun. This one will have the option of growing up here, creating a nice canopy here if it wants to. So let's go ahead and start digging this hole. Here we go. Alright, so I went ahead and dug out a bunch of this hole, not doing it as deep or as wide as I did some of the originals here in the green yard, like the loquat and the Michaelia alba behind me. I dug big, 2 to 3 foot wide, 2 to 3 foot deep holes. I'm finding as I'm planting more trees that the areas that already have the mulch ground covering, the areas that already are established with that mulch, that are starting to turn into more of this dark clay soil instead of regular just clay soil, actually seeing more success just digging more of a normal hole, mixing. I still mix in my nursery soil into the hole to get it started, and then I go ahead and cover it up, mixing that dirt. But I'm not having to add or create such a large hole, add quite as much soil as I did previously, because that mulch is already starting to break down, which is really nice. So with this one, same thing, did a little bit smaller hole. It's about 1.5 feet wide, 2 feet deep still. I have some native soil in the bottom, and I'm going to go and get our nursery soil to start mixing this together and get ready to plant the Santol. Here we go. Alright, so we're pretty much good to go here. I'm going to scoop out at least 1 shovel full, maybe even 2, to make room for the plant itself. I always want to put it on the side so that way it's easy access. I can just kind of scoot it into its spot here. So here's our beautiful Santol tree, like I mentioned before, doing very well, growing lots. And we're going to go ahead and get it out of the pot here. I'm hoping it's rooted out, but I have a feeling that it is not. So we may have to do a little bit of rescuing here when it comes to the root flare and the root ball, as well. A little bit of both. Try to loosen it up as best I can, being careful of the leaves. It is kind of a more sensitive plant. And then we're going to squeeze the sides and see if we can get this guy out of here. It's really not very rooted out. Got a little bit of a root ball coming out. Here we go. Alright, so I'm going to try to keep it together as best I can. So we get it out of here and tip it up. Okay, there we go. Now it's out of the pot. Let's tip it up and put it into its position. That's actually a really good level for it. I know we talked before about wanting to have the root flare, those kind of top roots, be above the grade. So we want it to be above the ground, because that root flare is how the tree will actually work on breathing. So it's important to have that root flare open, get some oxygen to those roots down there. Okay, perfect. That actually worked out really, really, really well. So I went ahead and filled in my dirt as best I could. I have my root flare showing. It was actually a little too deep in the pot, so it's a good thing that I replanted it here. Just kind of smoothing the ground as best we can. Need a little bit more dirt, or soil I should say, just a tiny bit more soil in here. All right, that looks pretty fantastic. Okay, make sure it is straight though. That's something that it is not right now, so I'm gonna kind of straighten it out as best I can. You're not supposed to, with tropical trees, I found that pushing down on the dirt and really making that dirt hard, that compaction, is actually really bad for those tropical trees. They want to have more of a loose soil. So I try to not compact it that much. But this one does need a little bit compaction. It is just too loose in there. So perfect. All right, so now, just like all of my other trees, I am going to make a little bit of a berm around it, and of course add in the mulch. Nice thing is that I have all this mulch right here, so I don't have to go very far to add it in. And then of course do that, sulfur and a little bit of azomite like we've been talking about previously. So let's go ahead and add that berm in. All right, so it looks very good, looks really happy. One thing that you have to make sure of with that mulch, which we talked about before, is that root flare is still visible here. Remember, if you put too much mulch on, lots of bad things can happen, including rotting of the tree, things like that. Things that we don't want to have happen to our brand new trees. So Santol's in the ground. I'm going to go ahead and grab some sulfur and sprinkle it around. All right, we're gonna go ahead and add in that sulfur here, like we always do. Sprinkle around. Santol does require a pretty low pH, so I'm gonna add a decent amount of sulfur here, and I'll be doing it pretty much every 3 months or so getting started. All right, so there we have it. We have our beautiful Santol tree, freshly planted in the ground. It's looking happy. See, some of these brand new leaves are starting to perk up a little bit there, which is what we want. So ultra tropical tree, I'm very excited to have it here in the green yard. I think this microclimate setup will work perfectly for it. It's actually going to do very, very well here, and hopefully fruit someday, so we can have some of those Santol fruits. As I mentioned before, mangosteen is my favorite fruit, so I'm excited to have something that's a little bit similar to it. So from the green yard, the food forest part of the green yard, I hope everyone is having a good time gardening, and as always, live green, plant lots, and of course, have fun. I know I will. We'll see you next time.